In the heart of a sprawling city filled with towering skyscrapers and bustling streets, there lived a boy named Ethan. He was just 14 years old but had already seen more hardship than most people experience in a lifetime. Ethan's life wasn't like other kids his age. While they went to school, played video games, or hung out with friends, Ethan spent his days wandering through narrow alleys, searching for food scraps in trash bins and finding shelter wherever he could. His parents had abandoned him when he was very young, leaving him to fend for himself in a world that often felt cold and unforgiving. Ethan's appearance matched his circumstances. His clothes were torn and patched up multiple times. His shoes had holes in them, and his hair was messy from weeks without a proper wash. But despite everything, Ethan had a kind heart. He shared what little he had with others who were even less fortunate than him. Whether it was half a sandwich he found in a dumpster or an old blanket he no longer needed. People in the neighborhood sometimes noticed him and shook their heads in pity, but few ever stopped to help. Life on the streets had taught Ethan to be resourceful, brave, and independent. One bitterly cold winter night, Ethan huddled under a thin tarp he'd scavenged, trying to shield himself from the biting wind. The temperature had dropped so low that even his usual hiding spot near the train station didn't offer much warmth. Hungry and tired, he decided to walk around the city to keep moving and stay warm. As he passed by an upscale restaurant, the smell of freshly cooked food wafted into the air, making his stomach growl painfully. He peeked inside the large glass windows, watching well-dressed families enjoy lavish meals while laughter echoed through the room. It was a stark contrast to his own reality. Feeling defeated, Ethan turned away and started walking down a dimly lit alley behind the restaurant. He hoped to find something edible in the trash bins outside. Just as he reached one of the bins and began rummaging through its contents, he heard a faint sound, a soft whimper, almost like a kitten mewing. At first, he thought it might be an animal stuck somewhere, so he followed the noise deeper into the alley. The further he went, the louder the sounds became until finally, he saw something that made his breath catch in his throat. There, lying on a pile of old newspapers, were two tiny babies wrapped in expensive-looking silk blankets. Their faces were red from crying, and their small bodies trembled in the freezing air. Ethan froze, unsure of what to do. He'd never seen anything like this before. Who would leave two helpless infants alone in such a dangerous place? Carefully, he knelt beside them and noticed a folded piece of paper tucked under one of the blankets. With trembling hands, he picked it up and opened it. Written in neat handwriting were just a few words. "Please take care of my precious angels." Ethan's mind raced. What was he supposed to do? He was just a kid himself, struggling to survive day by day. How could he possibly look after two babies? But as he looked at their innocent faces, his heart melted. They were so small, so vulnerable. He couldn't just leave them there to freeze or worse. Taking a deep breath, Ethan scooped the babies into his arms, holding them close to his chest to share whatever body heat he had. He didn't know much about taking care of babies, but he knew he had to try, carrying the twins back to his makeshift shelter under a nearby bridge. Ethan felt a mix of emotions swirling inside him: fear, confusion, and a strange sense of purpose. For the first time in a long while, he felt needed. These babies depended on him now, and that thought both terrified and inspired him. Little did he know, this unexpected discovery would change not only his life, but also the lives of many others, including someone far away who desperately missed these precious angels. As Ethan settled down with the twins, naming them Lily and Noah because those names sounded sweet and hopeful, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something extraordinary. The city around him continued to buzz with activity, oblivious to the drama unfolding in a quiet corner beneath the bridge. But somewhere out there, wheels were already turning, setting off a chain of events that would bring secrets to light, challenge destinies, and reveal the true meaning of family. The next morning, Ethan woke up earlier than usual. The sun had barely begun to rise, casting a pale golden glow over the city. His makeshift shelter under the bridge was quiet, save for the soft breathing of the two babies nestled beside him. Lily and Noah were still asleep, their tiny faces peaceful and content. For a moment, Ethan allowed himself to feel a flicker of happiness, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. But as reality sank in, his heart grew heavy again. How was he, a homeless boy with nothing to his name, going to take care of these precious little lives? Ethan knew he couldn't rely on scraps anymore. Babies needed proper food, warmth, and care, things he didn't have access to. Determined not to give up, he carefully wrapped the twins in the silk blankets they'd been left with and set out, into the chilly morning air. His first stop was a nearby grocery store. He lingered outside, watching people come and go until he spotted a young woman pushing a stroller. Summoning his courage, Ethan approached her hesitantly. "Excuse me," he said softly, trying not to startle her. I found these babies last night. They're hungry and I don't know what they need. Can you help me?" The woman's eyes widened in shock as she looked at the infants in his arms. Without hesitation, she nodded and led him inside the store. She helped him pick out formula, bottles, diapers, and other essentials, explaining how to prepare everything step by step. Ethan listened intently, committing every detail to memory. Though he didn't have enough money to pay for all the items, he promised to work off the cost somehow. Moved by his determination, the woman paid for everything herself, telling him, "You're doing something amazing, kid. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Back at his shelter, Ethan worked tirelessly to follow the instructions he'd been given. Mixing the formula wasn't easy. His hands shook nervously as he poured water into the bottle, but eventually he managed to feed both babies. Watching them drink hungrily brought tears to his eyes. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt like he was making a difference, even if it was just for these two tiny souls. As days turned into weeks, Ethan settled into a routine. He woke up early each day, fed the twins, cleaned them, and then went out to find food or odd jobs to earn some money. Sometimes he sang lullabies to soothe them when they cried, though his voice cracked and wasn't particularly musical. Other times, he simply held them close, rocking them gently until they fell asleep. Despite the challenges, Ethan discovered a strength within himself that he never knew existed. Caring for Lily and Noah gave him a sense of purpose he'd never felt before. Meanwhile, across town, in a luxurious penthouse overlooking the city skyline, billionaire entrepreneur Daniel Hartley paced back and forth, his face etched with worry. Daniel was a man who prided himself on being in control of every aspect of his life. He ran a successful tech company, drove expensive cars, and lived in a home filled with modern art and designer furniture. Yet none of that mattered now, because his world had been turned upside down. A few weeks earlier, his wife Elizabeth had vanished without a trace. At first, Daniel thought she might be visiting friends or taking a break from their hectic lifestyle. But when days passed without any word from her, panic set in. Then came the devastating news. Elizabeth had secretly given birth to twins after enduring years of fertility treatments. Somehow she had managed to keep her pregnancy hidden from everyone, including Daniel. And now both she and the babies were missing. Daniel hired private investigators and launched a massive search effort, offering a substantial reward for information about his family. Posters with Elizabeth's picture and details about the twins appeared all over the city. News outlets covered the story extensively, speculating about what might have happened. Was Elizabeth kidnapped? Had she run away? No one knew for sure, but Daniel refused to give up hope. He spent sleepless nights staring at photos of his wife, wondering where she could be and whether their children were safe. One evening, while scrolling through social media updates related to the case, Daniel stumbled upon a comment that caught his attention. Someone mentioned seeing a homeless boy carrying two babies near a park. The description matched the age and appearance of his twins. Could it really be them? Desperate for answers, Daniel instructed his team to investigate immediately. If there was even the slightest chance those babies were his, he had to act quickly. Unbeknownst to Ethan, whispers of the Millionaire's search were spreading throughout the city. Word reached local shelters and community centers, including the one where Ethan occasionally sought advice from a kind-hearted nurse named Sarah. Sarah had taken a liking to Ethan and admired his dedication to the twins. When she heard rumors about a wealthy businessman searching for abandoned babies, she pulled Ethan aside during one of his visits. "Ethan, she began cautiously. There's something you need to know. A very rich man, is looking for twin babies that match the description of Lily and Noah. People are saying he thinks they're his kids. Ethan's stomach churned. He had suspected the babies belonged to someone important based on the expensive blankets and clothing they'd been left with. But hearing it confirmed made his chest tighten with anxiety. What would happen if this man found them? Would he take Lily and Noah away? Would he blame Ethan for keeping them? I can't lose them, Ethan stammered, clutching the twins protectively. They're my family now. Sarah placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. I understand how much you care for them, Ethan. But you have to think about what's best for the babies. If this man is their father, he can give them a life you can't provide. Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes, but he nodded silently. Deep down, he knew Sarah was right. Still, the thought of letting go of Lily and Noah felt unbearable. Over the next few days, Ethan wrestled with conflicting emotions. He loved the twins more than anything, but he also wanted what was best for them. As fate would have it, the decision wouldn't remain in his hands for long. Little did Ethan realize wheels were already in motion. Daniel Hartley's investigators were closing in, following leads that would inevitably lead them straight to the boy who had unknowingly saved his children. And when their paths finally crossed, nothing would ever be the same for any of them. Ethan's life had changed dramatically since the night he found Lily and Noah. Every waking moment revolved around their care, and though it was exhausting, he wouldn't trade it for anything. The bond he shared with the twins was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. They weren't just babies to him, they were his family. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt needed, loved, and important. He would sing to them softly when they cried, cradle them close during thunderstorms, and marvel at how their tiny fingers curled around his own. Even in the midst of hardship, there was a kind of magic in those moments. But as much joy as the twins brought him, Ethan couldn't ignore the growing unease in the back of his mind. Whispers about the millionaire searching for his missing children had reached him through Sarah, the nurse who often helped him. At first, Ethan tried to push those thoughts aside, convincing himself that no one would connect him to the babies. After all, why would anyone suspect a homeless boy of having anything to do with such an extraordinary case? Yet deep down, he knew it was only a matter of time before someone figured it out. One chilly afternoon, while Ethan sat on a park bench feeding Lily and Noah, he noticed a man watching him from across the path. The stranger stood near a sleek black car dressed in a sharp suit that screamed wealth and authority. Ethan tensed immediately, instinctively pulling the twins closer to his chest. His heart began to race as the man started walking toward him, each step deliberate and purposeful. By the time the stranger reached the bench, Ethan's hands were trembling, not just from fear but also from the weight of what this encounter might mean. "Are you Ethan?" the man asked, his voice calm but tinged with urgency. Ethan hesitated, unsure whether to answer. Instead, he clutched the twins tighter, his protective instincts kicking in. "Who are you?" he shot back, his tone defensive. The man held up his hand slightly as if to show he meant no harm. "My name is Daniel Hartley," he said. "I'm looking for my children, my twins. Someone told me they might be with you." For a moment, Ethan couldn't breathe. This was the man everyone had been talking about, the billionaire whose wife had disappeared along with their babies. And now here he was, standing right in front of Ethan, asking for the very thing Ethan feared most. Lily and Noah. "They're not yours," Ethan blurted out, surprising even himself. It wasn't true, of course. He knew these babies likely belonged to Daniel, but panic clouded his judgment. "You can't take them." Daniel's expression softened, and for the first time Ethan saw something other than determination in the man's eyes. There was pain, vulnerability, and an overwhelming sense of longing. Slowly, Daniel lowered himself onto the bench beside Ethan, careful not to startle him further. "I understand how you feel," Daniel said quietly. "These babies have been your world, haven't they? You've taken care of them, kept them safe when no one else could. That takes courage and love. But I need you to know something. They're my children. My wife gave birth to them. And then she disappeared. I've been searching for them ever since. Ethan stared at Daniel, torn between disbelief and guilt. Part of him wanted to argue, to insist that Lily and Noah deserved better than a life where they'd been abandoned in an alley. But another part of him recognized the raw honesty in Daniel's words. This man wasn't angry or accusing. He was desperate, just like Ethan had been when he found the twins that cold winter night. I didn't steal them, Ethan finally muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. I found them. Someone left them in an alley. There was a note. He trailed off, unsure how to explain without sounding defensive. To his surprise, Daniel nodded. I believe you, he said. And I'm grateful for everything you've done, but I need to make sure they're safe. They're my responsibility now. The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. Responsibility. It was a word he understood all too well, yet hearing it come from Daniel made him realize just how unprepared he truly was. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't give Lily and Noah the life they deserved. A life filled with security, warmth, and opportunities. Daniel could offer them all of that and more. Still, letting go wasn't easy. Over the next few days, Daniel arranged for Ethan to meet him privately at a small cafe near the park. Reluctantly, Ethan agreed, bringing the twins along. During their conversation, Daniel learned about the note Ethan had found and how he'd cared for the babies despite having nothing himself. As Daniel listened, he began to see Ethan in a different light, not as some random stranger, but as someone who had risked everything to protect his children. I don't want to take them away from you completely, Daniel admitted after a long pause. You've become a part of their lives, and that matters. If you're willing, I'd like you to stay involved, to help raise them. Ethan blinked, stunned by the offer. Stay involved? How could that even work? He was a homeless boy living under a bridge, while Daniel lived in a penthouse overlooking the city. Their worlds couldn't be more different. It's impossible, Ethan said, shaking his head. I'm nobody. I can't just walk into your world like this. You're wrong, Daniel replied firmly. You're already part of their world. Look at how much you've done for them. You saved their lives. That makes you somebody. For the first time in weeks, Ethan allowed himself to imagine a future where he wasn't alone anymore, where Lily and Noah could grow up knowing, both him and Daniel. It was a strange thought, almost surreal, but it gave him hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, things could turn out okay after all. As they parted ways that day, Daniel promised to help Ethan get back on his feet. He offered to pay for schooling, provide housing, and mentor him so he could build a better life, not just for himself, but for the twins too. Ethan accepted cautiously, still unsure of what lay ahead. But one thing was certain. His journey with Lily and Noah was far from over. Little did either of them know, however, that their newfound arrangement would soon uncover secrets neither of them expected. Secrets that would challenge everything they thought they knew about family, trust, and love. And as these revelations unfolded, Ethan and Daniel would discover that sometimes the hardest choices lead to the most beautiful outcomes. The days following Ethan and Daniel's meeting were filled with a mix of uncertainty and cautious optimism. For Ethan, it was hard to wrap his head around the idea that someone like Daniel, a billionaire with a life so different from his own, wanted him to remain part of Lily and Noah's lives. At first, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was all too good to be true. He had spent most of his life being ignored or dismissed by society, so trusting Daniel's intentions wasn't easy. But as they began spending more time together, Ethan slowly started to see a side of Daniel he hadn't expected, a man who genuinely cared about doing what was best for his children. Daniel, on the other hand, was equally conflicted. He had always prided himself on being in control of every situation, but this was uncharted territory. The thought of sharing parenting responsibilities with a homeless teenager seemed impossible at first glance. Yet, the more he observed Ethan's bond with the twins, the clearer it became that Ethan's role in their lives was irreplaceable. There was something pure and selfless about how Ethan loved Lily and Noah, and Daniel realized that cutting him out entirely would do more harm than good, not just for Ethan but for the babies too. To ease the transition, Daniel invited Ethan to visit his penthouse apartment. It was a daunting experience for Ethan, stepping into a world so far removed from his own. The sleek furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows, and breathtaking views of the city skyline made him feel out of place. But Daniel went out of his way to make Ethan comfortable, offering him a warm meal and showing him around the spacious home where Lily and Noah would now live. Despite his nerves, Ethan couldn't help but notice how much safer and brighter this environment was compared to the cold, damp shelter he'd called home. During one of these visits, Daniel decided it was time to dig deeper into the mystery surrounding Elizabeth's disappearance. He confided in Ethan about the private investigators he had hired and the leads they were chasing. "I need to find her," Daniel said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Not just for me, but for the twins. They deserve to know their mother." Ethan listened intently, realizing how little he actually knew about the circumstances that led to Lily and Noah being left in that alley. As Daniel shared bits and pieces of his marriage with Elizabeth, a troubling picture began to emerge. Elizabeth had struggled with anxiety and depression for years, exacerbated by the pressure of trying to conceive. When she finally became pregnant, she kept it hidden, fearing Daniel's controlling nature and perfectionism might overshadow her joy. By the time the twins were born, Elizabeth felt trapped, unable to cope with the weight of her husband's expectations. In desperation, she fled, leaving behind the babies she loved but believed she couldn't care for. Hearing this story shook Ethan to his core. He had always assumed the worst, that someone heartless had abandoned the twins without a second thought. But learning that Elizabeth had acted out of fear and love complicated everything. It made him realize that people weren't always black and white. Sometimes they were simply broken. As Daniel continued his search for Elizabeth, he also focused on building a new kind of family with Ethan and the twins. He enrolled Ethan in a local high school, ensuring he received the education he deserved. He rented a small apartment for Ethan nearby, giving him a stable place to live while still staying close to Lily and Noah. Every day, Ethan visited the penthouse to help care for the twins, learning alongside Daniel how to balance feeding schedules, diaper changes, and bedtime routines. Though their backgrounds couldn't have been more different, they found common ground in their shared love for the babies. One evening, as Ethan rocked Noah to sleep, Daniel walked into the nursery and watched silently from the doorway. Seeing the tenderness in Ethan's actions reminded him of why he had chosen to keep the boy involved. "You're amazing with them," Daniel said softly, breaking the silence. Ethan looked up, startled. "I'm just doing what anyone would do," he replied modestly. "No," Daniel countered. "Not everyone would have done what you did. You saved my children when no one else could. That's extraordinary." Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. For so long he had seen himself as worthless, a burden to society. But hearing those words from Daniel made him reconsider. Maybe he wasn't just some kid who got lucky. Maybe he really did have something valuable to offer. As weeks turned into months, Ethan and Daniel settled into a rhythm. They took turns caring for the twins, dividing responsibilities based on their strengths. Ethan brought warmth and patience while Daniel provided structure and stability. Together they created a nurturing environment where Lily and Noah thrived. The twins began smiling more, cooing happily whenever either of their fathers entered the room. Watching them grow and develop filled both men with a sense of pride neither had ever experienced before. But even as their unconventional family dynamic strengthened, questions lingered in the background. What would happen if Elizabeth returned? Would she want the twins back? And how would Ethan fit into the picture then? These uncertainties weighed heavily on both men, though they rarely spoke of them aloud. Instead, they focused on the present, cherishing each moment they had with Lily and Noah. Unbeknownst to them, however, answers were closer than they realized. One afternoon, while reviewing surveillance footage from the night Elizabeth disappeared, Daniel's investigators stumbled upon a crucial clue. A grainy video showed Elizabeth boarding a bus headed out of town, carrying only a small suitcase. Following the lead, They traced her journey to a quiet seaside town several hours away. There, they discovered she had taken refuge in a women's shelter, struggling to rebuild her life after months of isolation. When Daniel learned of this breakthrough, he faced a difficult decision. Should he confront Elizabeth immediately, demanding answers and reclaiming his role as her husband and the father of her children? Or should he approach her gently, giving her the space she needed to heal? After much deliberation, he chose the latter, deciding that reconciliation, if it was even possible, would require patience and understanding. With Ethan's blessing, Daniel traveled to the seaside town to meet Elizabeth. Their reunion was emotional, filled with tears, apologies, and painful truths. Elizabeth admitted she had never stopped loving her family, but had been too afraid to return, convinced she wasn't strong enough to be the mother her children needed. Hearing this, Daniel realized how much blame rested on his shoulders. His relentless pursuit of success and perfection had pushed Elizabeth to the brink, forcing her to make an impossible choice. Back in the city, Ethan waited anxiously for news of Daniel's trip. Though he trusted Daniel to handle things responsibly, he couldn't help but worry about what Elizabeth's reappearance might mean for his relationship with the twins. Would she resent him for taking her place during her absence? Would she try to erase the bond he had built with Lily and Noah? When Daniel returned, he assured Ethan that nothing would change between them. Elizabeth had agreed to seek therapy and work toward healing, but she understood the vital role Ethan played in the twins' lives. She didn't see him as a threat, but as a guardian angel who had stepped in when she couldn't. This revelation brought relief to Ethan, who had feared rejection once again. In the end, their unique family structure became a testament to resilience, forgiveness, and unconditional love. Through trials and challenges, Ethan and Daniel proved that families aren't defined by blood alone. They're shaped by the connections we forge and the sacrifices we make for those we hold dear. And as Lily and Noah grew older, surrounded by two devoted fathers and a mother working to reclaim her place, they blossomed into happy, healthy children who knew they were deeply loved. The weeks that followed Daniel's meeting with Elizabeth were a whirlwind of emotions for everyone involved. For the first time since her disappearance, Elizabeth began taking small steps toward rebuilding her life. With the support of the women's shelter and ongoing therapy sessions, she started to confront the fears and anxieties that had driven her away from her family. It was a slow process filled with setbacks and moments of doubt, but she remained determined to heal, not just for herself, but for Lily and Noah. Daniel visited Elizabeth regularly, keeping her updated on the twins' progress. He brought photos and videos of them smiling, giggling, and reaching new milestones. At first, Elizabeth hesitated to watch, guilt overwhelming her as she thought about all the moments she had missed. But over time, seeing her children happy gave her hope. She realized that while she hadn't been physically present, they were thriving under the care of two loving figures, Daniel and Ethan. This realization softened her heart toward both men, especially Ethan, whose actions had saved her babies when she couldn't. Back in the city, Ethan continued to play an active role in the twins' lives. Though he now lived in a cozy apartment provided by Daniel, his days revolved around caring for Lily and Noah. He helped feed them, bathe them, and soothe them when they cried. His bond with the babies grew stronger with each passing day, and he cherished every moment spent with them. Yet despite the joy they brought him, Ethan couldn't shake the lingering fear that Elizabeth might one day decide to take them away entirely. He tried not to dwell on it, reminding himself that Daniel had promised to keep him involved no matter what. Still, doubts crept in whenever he allowed himself to think too far ahead. One evening, as Ethan sat on the floor of the nursery playing peekaboo with the twins, Daniel walked in carrying a stack of papers. "We need to talk," he said gently, sitting down across from Ethan. The serious tone of his voice made Ethan's stomach tighten. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked, instinctively pulling Lily closer to his chest. "Nothing's wrong," Daniel assured him quickly. "In fact, it's quite the opposite. I've been thinking a lot about our situation, about how we've managed to create this unique family dynamic. And I believe it's working because we're putting the twins' needs above everything else. Ethan nodded cautiously, unsure where this conversation was headed. Okay. I want us to formalize things, Daniel continued. Not legally, necessarily, but emotionally. I think it's important for you to know that you're not just some temporary caregiver or babysitter. You're their father, Ethan, just as much as I am. Ethan froze, stunned by Daniel's words. Father? Him? The idea seemed impossible. He was just a homeless boy who had stumbled upon 2 abandoned babies in an alley. How could he possibly deserve such a title? I don't know what to say, Ethan admitted after a long pause. I mean, I love them more than anything, but I'm not. You're their real dad, not me. That's where you're wrong, Daniel said firmly. Being a father isn't about biology. It's about love, sacrifice, and showing up when it matters most. You've done all of that and more for Lily and Noah. So yes, you are their father. And I want you to embrace that role fully. Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes as he processed Daniel's words. For so long he had seen himself as unworthy, someone who didn't belong anywhere. But here was Daniel, telling him that he mattered, that he was essential to the twins' happiness and well-being. It was a validation Ethan had never expected, and it filled him with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt before. Over the next few weeks, Daniel worked tirelessly to ensure Ethan felt secure in his new role. He enrolled Ethan in parenting classes, alongside him, helping him learn even more about child development and early education. They attended doctor appointments together, consulted pediatricians, and discussed strategies for raising happy, healthy children. Slowly but surely, Ethan began to see himself not as an outsider looking in, but as an equal partner in the twins' upbringing. Meanwhile, Elizabeth continued making strides in her recovery. She started visiting the city occasionally, staying at a nearby hotel during her trips. These visits were carefully planned, with Daniel ensuring she eased back into the twins' lives gradually. At first, Elizabeth simply observed from a distance, watching as Ethan and Daniel interacted with Lily and Noah. Seeing the bond they shared brought tears to her eyes, but instead of feeling jealous or resentful, she felt grateful. Grateful that her babies had been cared for so lovingly in her absence. As Elizabeth grew more comfortable, she began spending short periods alone with the twins under Daniel's supervision. She read them stories, sang lullabies, and held them close, marveling at how much they had grown. Though it was bittersweet to realize how much she had missed, she took comfort in knowing that Lily and Noah were surrounded by people who loved them deeply. One afternoon, while Ethan was feeding the twins in the park, Elizabeth approached him nervously. "Hi, Ethan," she said softly, kneeling beside him. "Can we talk?" Ethan tensed slightly, unsure of what to expect. He had avoided direct interactions with Elizabeth until now, fearing she might blame him for stepping into her role. But the kindness in her eyes put him at ease. "Of course," he replied, shifting Noah to one arm so he could free up his other hand. Elizabeth hesitated before speaking. "I just wanted to thank you for everything you've done for my babies. I know I wasn't there when they needed me, but you were. You saved them, Ethan, and I'll never be able to repay you for that." Her words caught Ethan off guard, and he struggled to respond. "I didn't do anything special," he mumbled, embarrassed by the praise. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No," Elizabeth countered firmly. "Not everyone would have done what you did. You risked everything to protect them. That makes you extraordinary." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the rustling leaves overhead and the distant laughter of children playing nearby. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. Do you think we can make this work? All of us together?" Elizabeth smiled warmly. "I think we already are. We may not be a traditional family, but we're building something beautiful, something based on love, trust, and forgiveness. And as long as Lily and Noah are happy, that's all that matters." Their conversation marked a turning point. From that day forward, Elizabeth became a more regular presence in the twins' lives. She joined Ethan and Daniel in caring for them, creating a harmonious routine that blended structure, warmth, and affection. Together, they formed an unconventional yet deeply connected family unit, one built on mutual respect and shared responsibility. As the months passed, Ethan found himself reflecting on how far he had come. Gone were the days of scavenging for food in alleys or sleeping under bridges. In their place stood a stable home, meaningful relationships, and a purpose that gave his life direction. He still faced challenges, of course. Balancing schoolwork, parenting duties, and personal growth wasn't easy. But he tackled them head-on, knowing he had a support system unlike any other. And then, one crisp autumn morning, something remarkable happened. As Ethan pushed the twins in their stroller through the park, a stranger stopped him to comment on how adorable Lily and Noah were. "You must be so proud of your kids," the woman said with a smile. Without hesitation, Ethan nodded. "I am," he replied, his voice filled with pride. "They're my whole world." It was a simple exchange, but it carried profound significance. For the first time in his life, Ethan truly believed those words. Lily and Noah weren't just babies he had stumbled upon. They were his children, his family, and no matter what challenges lay ahead, he knew they would face them together, united by love and resilience. As the years rolled by, the lives of Ethan, Daniel, Elizabeth, and the twins transformed in ways no one could have predicted. What had started as a chance encounter in a dark alley blossomed into a story of resilience, love, and redemption, a testament to the power of second chances and the unbreakable bonds of family. Ethan's journey was nothing short of extraordinary. The boy who once scavenged for scraps in trash bins now stood tall, not just physically but emotionally. With Daniel's support, he completed high school and enrolled in college, studying early childhood education so he could better understand how to nurture Lily and Noah as they grew older. His professors often remarked on his dedication and passion, qualities that stemmed from his deep connection with the twins. Though balancing academics, work, and parenting responsibilities was challenging, Ethan thrived under the pressure. He knew he was setting an example for Lily and Noah, one of perseverance, hard work, and never giving up, no matter how tough life got. Daniel, too, underwent a profound transformation. Once consumed by his career and driven by perfectionism, he learned to slow down and appreciate the beauty of imperfection. Watching Ethan care for the twins taught him the importance of patience, empathy, and unconditional love. He became more present, not just as a father, but as a partner to Elizabeth and a mentor to Ethan. Together, the three of them created a harmonious rhythm, each playing a vital role in raising Lily and Noah. Daniel's penthouse, once a symbol of wealth and isolation, transformed into a warm home filled with laughter, toys scattered across the floor, and the sweet chaos of family life. Elizabeth's recovery continued to progress steadily. Therapy helped her confront the fears and anxieties that had driven her away, and she slowly regained confidence in herself as a mother. Her visits with the twins grew longer and more frequent until she eventually moved back to the city permanently. She rented a small apartment nearby, allowing her to stay close to her children while maintaining her independence. Though she still struggled at times, particularly when guilt over her absence crept in, she found solace in knowing she was part of something special, a family that embraced her flaws and celebrated her strengths. Lily and Noah, now toddlers, full of energy and curiosity, flourished under the care of their three devoted parents. They adored Ethan's playful nature, giggling uncontrollably whenever he made silly faces or chased them around the park. Daniel's calm demeanor provided stability, teaching them valuable lessons about kindness, responsibility, and respect. And Elizabeth's gentle touch reminded them of the warmth and tenderness only a mother could offer. Despite their unconventional upbringing, the twins were surrounded by love, laughter, and unwavering support, everything a child could need to grow into happy, confident individuals. Their unique family dynamic drew attention from neighbors, friends, and even strangers who marveled at the bond they shared. At first, people whispered behind closed doors, speculating about how such an unusual arrangement could possibly work. But as time went on, it became clear that this wasn't just some fleeting experiment. It was a genuine partnership rooted in trust, communication, and mutual respect. The twins' joyful personalities spoke volumes, proving that love knows no boundaries. One sunny afternoon during a picnic in the park, a local journalist approached Daniel and Ethan. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly, holding up a notebook. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but I've heard your story, and I think it's truly inspiring. Would you be willing to share it with others?" Ethan glanced nervously at Daniel, unsure of how to respond. Sharing their story meant opening themselves up to judgment and scrutiny, something neither of them relished. But Daniel placed a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder and nodded. "We'd be honored," he replied. The article appeared in a prominent magazine a few weeks later, capturing hearts across the nation. Readers were moved by the tale of a homeless boy who had saved 2 abandoned babies, only to discover they belonged to a millionaire whose wife had vanished. The story highlighted the sacrifices Ethan had made, the struggles Elizabeth had overcome, and the unlikely alliance between Daniel and Ethan that had turned tragedy into triumph. Photos accompanied the piece, showing the twins smiling brightly, alongside their 3 parents, a visual representation of unity and love. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from people around the world, sharing their own stories of hardship, hope, and resilience. Some praised Ethan for his selflessness, calling him a hero. Others commended Daniel and Elizabeth for putting aside pride and ego to create a nurturing environment for their children. The article sparked conversations about what it means to be a family, challenging societal norms and encouraging people to embrace non-traditional structures. Inspired by the positive feedback, Ethan, Daniel, and Elizabeth decided to use their platform to give back to the community. They founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting families in crisis, offering resources and guidance to those facing homelessness, poverty, or mental health challenges. Ethan became the face of the initiative, speaking at schools and community centers about the importance of compassion and second chances. His speeches resonated deeply with audiences, especially young people who saw themselves in his story. Years later, as Lily and Noah prepared to start kindergarten, their family gathered for a quiet celebration. Sitting around the dinner table, they reflected on how far they had come since that fateful night in the alley. Ethan looked at the twins, now chattering excitedly about their upcoming adventures at school, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. He thought about the hardships he had endured, the loneliness, the hunger, the despair, and realized that every trial had led him to this moment, to a life filled with purpose, belonging, and love. "I never imagined things would turn out like this," Ethan said softly, breaking the silence. "When I found you 2 in that alley, I didn't know what the future held. But I do now, and I wouldn't change a thing." Elizabeth smiled warmly, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "None of us would," she agreed. "This family, our family, is proof that even in the darkest moments, there's always light waiting to shine through." Daniel raised his glass in a toast. "To us," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "to our messy, imperfect, beautiful family, and to the incredible journey that brought us here." As they clinked glasses, the room filled with laughter and tears, a reminder of how far they had come and how much they had achieved together. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. It was a fitting backdrop for a story that had begun in darkness but ended in brilliance, a story of hope, healing, and the enduring power of love.